Hey, last video for Unit 7, finishing up the progressive presidents. Last time we talked about Teddy Roosevelt and how he changed the office of the president to support the workers, support the people, not to blindly let big business do whatever they wanted to do. And that really changes what the presidency had looked like for some time now. Instead of Congress running the show, we have the actual president running the show. But eventually, Teddy is going to have to move on. And when Teddy does go to move on, he decides not to seek a third term. He won easily a second term. Um, but he says, okay, after the second term, it's time for me to walk away. And he pretty much chooses who the next in line will be. And that person is William Howard Taft. Taft was his best friend. Roosevelt trusted Taft, and Roosevelt supports Taft in his campaign to be president, which easily wins Taft the nomination, and it wins Taft the presidency. Once Taft wins, Roosevelt says, okay, I've chosen the person who's going to replace me. He's going to do a great job. It's time for me to retire. I'm going to go on a world tour that includes an African safari. Taft is going to continue my work. Everything is going to be great. But what ends up happening is while Taft will continue to bust up trust, in fact, he'll bust up more monopolies than Roosevelt had, he doesn't exactly follow everything that Roosevelt wanted to. And one of the pieces that he does that goes against Roosevelt's beliefs is the Payne-Aldrich tariff. Now remember, we've said this a million times now, and you know what's coming. A tariff is a tax on imported goods. Now, tariffs help big business. And because Taft passes the tariff, raising rates, it's seen as something that helps big business but hurts the progressives. The progressives are all about the people, not big business. And this is seen as something that would help monopolies by encouraging that American manufacturing, limiting their competition. Taft is also going to draw the attention of Roosevelt because he fires Pinchot, which was the leader of the Division of Forestry that was put in charge of Teddy's most sacred legacy, protecting those federal lands, those conservation efforts. Taft is going to hire a replacement that opposes all of Teddy's conservation efforts. And these two pieces are going to draw Roosevelt out of retirement and come back to try to seek a third term. In the election of 1912, Roosevelt is going to challenge Taft for the Republican nomination. He says Taft went against all of the Progressive Party ideas. We don't need him anymore. But it's very difficult to take a nomination from a current sitting president. So Taft is going to win the Republican Party candidacy. So Roosevelt says, okay, if the Republican Party doesn't want me, then I'll create my own political party. And he runs for the Progressive Party. The Progressive Party also gets the nickname Bull Moose Party because when Roosevelt was giving a campaign speech, he is going to get shot. He continues to give this speech even after being shot, and he says it's going to take more than a bullet to kill this bull moose, and it gives the political party the Bull Moose Party name. And then for the Democrats, we have Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson is going to gain the support of William Jennings Bryan. Remember him from the Populist Party. And with William Jennings Bryan's support, who had the people's vote, Wilson is going to win the presidency here. What happens is when Taft and Roosevelt split the Republican votes, and the Democrats remain one solid chunk of people voting for one candidate. It's just easy with the numbers there. So Wilson wins. He wins under the idea that he would pass the program of New Freedom. He is going to demand that the government take control of these big corporations to benefit small business. He runs on the idea that he'll attack the triple wall of privilege, which was the trusts, the banks, and the tariffs, all of which were hurting the people. And Wilson kind of lives up to his promises. When we look at Wilson as a president, he sticks to his guns. He's going to sign what's called the Underwood-Simmons Act, which reverses and reduces the tariff that was put into place by Taft. Reducing the tariff, reducing that tax on imported goods, creates more competition for American business, gives the consumer more options, and kind of reduces the power of those big monopolies. Under Woodrow Wilson, we're going to see the Federal Reserve Act signed, which we talked about in the last section. This is going to monitor the nation's currency, make it a little bit more flexible to help the people. We aren't going to be as tied to the gold standard. We're going to be able to print more paper money while monitoring it, of course, because we don't want any inflation. But it makes it easier for people to get loans. It makes it easier for people to get paper money because we see that the gold standard can be a little restricting. Wilson is also going to pass the Clayton Antitrust Act, and this we talked about in the last section as well. Remember, the Clayton Antitrust Act fixes all the problems of the Sherman Antitrust Act because Wilson doesn't do what Roosevelt had done before him. Wilson doesn't believe that there are good trusts and bad trusts and that we should guide the good trusts while destroying the bad. He says no. All trusts, all monopolies are bad. We need to get rid of all of them. At the end of Wilson's first term, he's going to feel that he had more to accomplish, so he'll run for his second term. What also plays to his benefit is that he gets reelected while we're kind of teetering on the brink of the US entering the First World War. And we're going to delve pretty deeply into this idea in the next unit. But Wilson, he kind of falls on both sides here. He says, I have more to accomplish fixing the United States as far as the political corruption and what was going on in the economy and what's happening in the society, but also I want to make sure that we don't get into the war. I've kept us out of the war so far. So Wilson kind of steps on both sides, what's happening in the United States and what's happening abroad, and that gets him elected to his next term. But when we look at the progressive era and all that we have talked about so far, there is a pretty steep legacy that's left behind that sticks with us today. During the progressive era, the federal government is going to grow to offer more protections to Americans. Before the progressive era, the federal government kind of had the stance that, oh, the people will fix it itself. Society will fix societal problems on their own. The federal government, there's no need for us to get in the way. But after the progressive era, we are going to see a trend where the federal government does get involved to protect Americans. They do step in and fix societal reforms. And we see that still happening today. Some of the controls that Roosevelt and Wilson put into place provide consumer protections that still exist today. The Pure Food and Drug Act still protects us today. The Meat Inspection Act still protects us today. The Clayton Antitrust Act still protects us today. So we're starting to get into a time period where what is put into place is long lasting and is going to be kept by the federal government. The progressive era reformers are going to pass on the idea that the government can take action to help the people and fix problems, and they have to step in and take action to fix the problems because no longer is a hands off government acceptable. Are we going to try a hands off government? Many times since the progressive era? Yes. Will it ever be successful? No, not really. It always has consequences. And the progressive era proves to us that the federal government can and should step in when needed to fix problems to help the people. That it's not an overstep of powers. We can debate how much the government should do for the people, and that will help you kind of assign yourself to a political ideology. But the idea that the government can help the people comes from the progressive era nonetheless. The last thing I want to leave you with is the question that we started with, and think about how does these reforms that we have looked at throughout the progressive era actually cause progress? What did the actions done by the progressive era do for the United States as a whole and the people as a whole? And with that question, I will leave you to ponder, knowing all the information that we know from the progressive era. Don't forget about your homework tonight, and any questions, let me know.